Oh hey, I'm glad you're here. Growing up in a video store is a sentence that instantly ages me. But I don't mind. It's like the old saying, age is nothing but a number, which is partly true, but it does discount all the rad chapters of your life and experiences and the time spent with people, which had to happen sometime, right? And I don't think age changes you, per se, but I do think your perspective changes. For instance, in my 20s, if I saw a witch in a horror movie just juicing babies to make a potion, I'd be like, gross and awesome. Now, I mean, I have a kid who was a baby, and I am older. So now when I see a witch juicing a baby to make a potion, I think, I wonder if that's good for osteoarthritis. Or at least a good moisturizer. I mean, it probably is. It looks pretty good. Some things you can change with. You can age with them, like bands whose sound can change over time, like the Golden Palominos, who, musicians came together, had guest vocalists like Michael Stipe, eventually had Lori Carson, and their sound kind of became this. Then, later on, they brought in Nicole Blackman, and their sound changed a little bit like this.
Open mouth, waiting for a candy kiss, and all you get is rain communion. Between lap dances and laptops, you see girls who fuck like they're bunless.
A different vibe for sure, but both appealed to me in their own way at different times in my life. Speaking of different times, it's like when the trailer for the new Crow movie came out, and sure, when they did the design reveal, I joked that they should have called it the Juggle Crow, on the account that in this universe, a person can be brought back from the dead by CGI birds, but the idea of a talented tattoo artist, completely implausible, non-existent. They're not going to size the artwork to the body. It was a little joke, because I like wordplay and puns. I don't care either way. But when people asked if I was upset over the trailer, of course not. I get that this director, same guy that put Scarlett Johansson as Major Motoko Kusanagi in Ghost in the Shell, Motoko, Scarlett, was now taking The Crow and making it for the SoundCloud rapper kids. I mean, I get it. It's not for me. Did I want to make the joke that I like to call this director Batman because he treats source material like it killed his parents? No. I did not publicly say that until now. I mean, I just did, but as a harmless rib tickler, I don't care either way. I will watch it, and I'm gonna feel old. Not because I prefer the original film from 1994, though I can just guarantee it, but because there's one thing that makes me feel my age when it comes to movies, and that's CGI. I know. How old am I to be on a soapbox about CGI? I have tried, and I am trying. But you can't argue one thing about the new CGI everything age. I miss the wonder of filmmaking. Here, just listen to Paul Thomas Anderson talking about the cinematography of the amazing Robbie Mueller.
I'm always trying to get night exteriors to look like Robbie Mueller did it, and I can never do it. I don't know how he did it. It doesn't look like there's any lights on. It looks like how it really looks. And back then, there's got to be a million lights on. I don't know how he did it. It's like a magic trick. As long as we keep doing it, I'll keep trying to get night exteriors to look like Robbie Mueller. And he had a magic with it, and that I can't quite figure out. It's something to look for in his photography that he was a master at. There are people that are good at certain things. He's the master at night exteriors, which can be very difficult. It can feel like it's lit, it can feel too stylized, or it can feel too dark, whatever. Robbie Mueller knew how to do it in a way like a chef with a secret sauce. I can't quite figure it out. I would hate to think that there won't be more artists like Robbie Mueller out there knowing the art of movie lighting. To be good at movie lighting is like a lifelong job. To be skillful at it and be great at it. And the great ones who are out there like masters of what they do.
Now, that's all gone when someone stands in front of a green screen or whatever will be next. They can light it however they want, with the computer. So there's no magic. And you can be like, there's an art to that too. Nobody can argue those things. But I just love the artistry of practical effects. Classic cinematography and lighting is such an art form. And the effects that went into special effects, makeup effects, it used to be, did you see the chainsaw rip through the body and blood spray everywhere? I mean, how did they make that? And I know people come to its defense, and it doesn't matter. It'll happen to us all. Eventually, if you're listening to this and you're in your 20s and you're like, I grew up on this, I don't mind it whatsoever, totally fine. But something will come along and you'll be like, this isn't for me. And it'll feel weird. That's the thing that'll make you feel old. Inside, you'll feel 18 still. But the fact that you're now the person that's like, back in my days, it's inescapable. But what can I say? I love practical effects. I want explosions, real ones. I want to see stuntmen in a full burn with actual fire. CGI fire doesn't look good. As you get older, you just don't have to be bitter. I guess that's my point. Because of all the artistic things you've loved, they're still there. And as long as you have your multi-region player and your physical media, or your record player and your records, you'll be able to put something on you connect to instead of being bent out of shape over a remake that isn't meant for you. Plus, with that record player and multi-region player and your physical media, you won't be starved for entertainment. Instead, you'll be drowning in it. Which segues perfectly, somehow, with this episode. I've bent your ear long enough, so let's just get right into this one. I love this episode, of course. Carmelita joins Sarah, Marshall, and myself as we talk about our first Peter Greenaway film on VHS. Unbelievable. So please, please sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Innocence can be hell.
Greetings and salutations. This is VHS, and I'm your host, Dirk Marshall. For this special occasion, my co-host returns. Welcome back, Sarah Marshall.
Hey!
You've been busy, but we're now past the holidays, past Hot One Season 22. How are things going for you?
Going good. This is our time to kind of reorganize our life. So I mostly dig through drawers and get rid of things that are broken and clean out the refrigerator.
Yeah.
Dumb stuff that you don't want to do the rest of the time.
Yeah, it's very fitting for the film that we're going to talk about, for a director who loves to fill the screen with the artifice of things, because that's been our life right now, is going through and being like, why did we keep this broken thing for 11 months and then purge our home from it? So It's good. We're also joined by returning guest Carmelita Valdez McKoy. Welcome back.
Thank you. Hi, friends.
Hi.
Hello. Now, if you're a listener, then you know the track record here with Carmelita. We got Derek Jarman, we got Gypsy 83, The Reflecting Skin, The Crow. Carmelita happens to be here for films that are near and dear to my heart, and it's so fitting that this is our first conversation about Peter Greenaway, so let's start there. Carmelita, what's your history with Peter Greenaway?
It's scant until very recently. Until just a few months ago, the only Peter Greenaway film I had ever seen was The Pillow Book.
Oh, really? It's usually either
Yes.
The Pillow Book or The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover. Those are usually the two
Right.
entry points for Peter Greenaway. So it's fitting that you started with the one with the most Ewan McGregor penis.
Yes. Well, and that's the thing, right? So I saw it in the 90s.
Same.
And after seeing Train Spotting, it
Oh,
was
yeah.
like, oh my God, I'm madly in love with Ewan McGregor. I need to see everything he's done. So, of course, I saw Shallow Grave. And then it was like, oh, he did this movie, The Pillow Book. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And I was really stoked about the nudity.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to spoil the Pillow Book for anyone who hasn't seen it,
Sure.
but it goes in some really interesting directions that I, at the time, was not prepared for. And then I would make other people watch it. I was like, oh my God, you have to see this movie.
Yeah.
So I had seen it a few times.
Yeah, I only saw it once, and I only remember about 8 inches of it. But
I have a really good The Pillow Book story.
Please
Can
share.
I tell
Yeah.
it really quickly?
Oh, please.
So I used to rent movies with my friends. I had a bunch of roommates at the time that movie came out, and I rented it under my name from Movie Madness, and we watched it. Talked about it. Great. Returned it, and then they called me and said I needed to return The Pillow Book, and I was like, dude, I returned it. Like, what are you talking about? But it's like in the little drop slot.
mm-hmm.
They kept saying, no, you didn't return it. And they said, we have the case, but the movie's not in it. And it was at this time where movie stores had to pay kind of a lot of money for a movie. And so they were like, if you don't return it to us, you have to pay us $300.
Well, that's excessive.
Which at the time I was like, I don't even make $300 in a month, probably, or whatever it is. Or it's like, that's more than my rent. Like, it was just this insane amount of money.
Yeah.
So then I kept saying, you guys must have made a mistake, And then I, of course, went and looked through all the movies, and the movie was in another movie. But this had gone on for like 2 months.
Right.
Where I was like, I returned the movie. This is on you, dudes. And it was totally me. I had returned the wrong movie. So then I just went.
And you know that they were thinking that you were hanging on to it.
They thought I wanted
because
to just
of the
watch
Ewan
it
McGregor
over
full
and
frontal
over
nudity.
and over and over, that I was just like so into it that I had to keep it in my life.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That is wonderful.
And I just watched it that one time.
Yeah. Same. I'm due for a rewatch, I guess. Sarah, what's your history with Peter Greenaway?
I was trying to remember the very first time that I saw this movie specifically, but I think probably The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover was the first one that I saw. And I think I rented it from Movie Madness. And then I think I went in and got and rented all of his collection that they had, which they had a pretty big collection, probably more than most places would,
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So that was it. That was like my entry point. And I knew what year specifically to tell you, because you were like, how do you know what year? I was like, at 1996. And it's just because that's the year that I didn't live at home anymore. And I lived in the city that had a, better movie store and movie collection. So that was my entry point.
Yeah. Mine was The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover. It's mostly because of the cover and all of the salacious things it says on the outside and the imagery. It was in the foreign section of Blockbuster.
Oh, wow.
We did not have this movie. We didn't even have a foreign section in our video store. And so when I saw it, I was like, well, I'm going to watch this. And it blew my mind. And then that led me backwards to this film, The Draftsman Contract, Belly of an Architect, things that I was like, oh, I love everything. But I was young. I didn't know why I loved it. And it wasn't until like this week that things started to kind of gel together on why I love Peter Greenaway movies. So I'm very excited to have this conversation. Also, this movie is one of the first things that we connected with that was a film. When Sarah and I first met, it was mostly music that we shared common interests in. In a conversation, probably by your fireplace, this movie came up, and you mentioned that you'd written all the games down in a notebook from the film, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I did the same. Like we just instantly bonded over a movie that I've never talked to another living soul about, but we never watched this movie together in almost 20 years of marriage and previously until last night.
Yeah, we realized last night that we both have loved this movie for a long time, but never watched it together.
We never watched it together.
Sweet and cute.
Yeah.
I love this story.
And then we watched it, and then I was like, but don't talk to me about it.
Yeah.
Save it for tomorrow.
Just keep looking forward. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, one thing I wanted to mention is that things started to kind of gel for me on Peter Greenaway. And what it is it's his love for painting. And it makes sense for me because I love Derek Jarman, who was a painter and then a filmmaker. And Peter Greenaway loves painting, and he fills the lens with like a painter fills a canvas. And as a child, he was obsessed with death, and I was probably obsessed with death as well. And he saw things like how trees lose leaves, how people grow old, how everything entropies. But painting is like a beauty held outside of time. And he loves cinema as an essay, but he thinks that it's a flawed thing for narrative capabilities. And it's so funny to hear him talk about film as a filmmaker because he has kind of a disdain for the art form he works in and a massive love for painting. And he mentions it all the time in interviews, and it's just fascinating because you don't often hear that. And he knows exactly why he does every single thing in his movies, which I also love because I spent decades being like, what does this mean? And what does this mean? And why is this here? And it's just there because he put it there. And I love that, like, because it's not this kind of thing where it's mysterious or anything. He'll just straight up tell you why something's green or why that, cockroach is there or why the camera's here on this landscape. And it's all drawing inspiration from painters and paintings. And that's fascinating to me. The film's from 1988, directed by Peter Greenaway, who did all the movies we've talked about just now, including also Night Watching is another one I wanted to plug. The film follows 3 women, who all named Sissy Culpersis, I can never say that last name, a granddaughter, a daughter, and a niece, and the 3 crimes that follow. I like that synopsis because it doesn't give too much away, because really the film itself is a simple story inspired by the Billy Goat Gruff limerick. I don't know if that's a limerick or what they call that kind of thing, but
Folktale.
Folktale, there we go. And so he's drawing from a folktale. He's kind of like inverting it in a way. It stars Joan Plowright, who was in Moby Dick, 3 Sisters, Avalon. Every time I see her face, I'm like, I love you. I love Joan Plowright. Juliet Stevenson, who was in Truly Madly Deeply and Bend It Like Beckham. Jolie Richardson, who was in King Ralph, Sister My Sister, and Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, for a little variety.
Yeah.
At the time of this recording, you can find this all over. They're on Blu-ray. I highly recommend them. They are gorgeous. And the Greenaway commentary and interviews are worth it for the ride alone. But I implore you to rent it at your local video store like Movie Madness right here in Portland, Oregon. Last thing I wanted to mention up top is the music, because this is crazy. On Greenaway's, do you have this too in your notes? I see you nodding. Okay.
Yeah.
On his specific instructions, the film's musical score by Michael Nyman is entirely based on themes from the slow movement of Mozart's Sinfonia Concertante in E. Concertante? I think I had that for dinner at an Italian restaurant. In E flat.
Delicious.
Yeah. So bars 58 through 61, of which are heard in their original form immediately after each drowning. The 58 also connects to the Jump Rope Girl. The number of stuff in this film is like what I think drew both of us in initially, and the imagery combined. The film begins with a number count and continues throughout the entire film and is completely balanced to the length of the film. 50 is directly at the midway point. 100 is at the end. And when it starts, I always think like, oh, that's going to drive me bonkers, like having a counter in the top of a screen of something and knowing how long you have to go. He did it completely intentionally, and even when he talks about it, he's like, well, I wanted people to know how long they're going to be checking their watches for. It's like, jeez. Okay. So we start with a child who's wearing a dress adorned with stars to mimic the sky above her. I love it.
1 Antares, 2 Capella, 3 Canopus, 4 Arcturus, 5 Agrita, 6 Nectar, 7 Duending, 8 Druid, 9 Agena, 10 Lalandra, 11 Vega, 12 Galubin, 13 Spiro, 14 Capra, 15 Crab, 16 Denib, 17 Sapo, 18 Castor, 19 Prolux, 20 Storsha, 21 Argano, 22 Spira, 23 Salkis, 24 Hoytown, 25 Lupa, 26 McKay, 27 Regulars, 28 Eridani, 29 Turner, 30 Riga, 31 Cursor, 32 Cuba.
I feel like it's one of the best opening scenes there are.
Yeah.
At least that I know of. It feels like you're on an elaborate play set or that you're in a painting. I mean, it's just with all of the colors and the simplicity of the scene. And at that time, I was taking a lot of screenwriting classes.
Yeah.
Not that I wanted to write a screenplay, I just was interested in that. And, my options were either taking like some kind of creative writing class or doing screenplay. So I chose this kind of screenplay track. So what I always think about now when I watch movies and at that time was how they write that out. It would be like outside, night, skipping girl jumps rope. So when I watch a scene like that, I picture the actual screenplay, which isn't everyone's experience, but
Right.
it's just mine because that's what I was kind of doing at that time. But it's such a perfectly written opening scene. Like you can picture it on paper and then how it came to life in this first scene.
Yeah. Carmelita, seeing this, it's a different Greenaway than Pillow Book per se. So
It is.
what was your thoughts going into it?
I've been through a little journey since you first pitched this to me, so I've been watching some Peter Greenaway films.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
And what have I watched recently? The Baby of Macon
Mm-hmm.
and 8.5 Women.
Mm-hmm.
It's been neat to see the through lines
Yes.
in terms of style and approach,
Oh, yeah.
but also the differences.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I rewatched The Pillow Book yesterday.
Oh, wow.
I like to prepare. I'm
Yeah,
this kind of
no.
podcasting nerd.
I love it.
I do this for fun. So, yeah, to contrast the two, that my first experience with Peter Greenaway, revisiting that, and then watching this again for the second time now. That opening is, yes, very much reminds me of like a stage play,
Mm-hmm.
like a painting. I love right from that opening sequence, we see how he's going to use light, colored light,
Yes.
and like fog to like set this ambiance.
Yeah.
And it's a very simple thing, a little girl skipping rope and counting stars, but it looks really operatic almost.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
Yeah, I agree. It's like, I mean, I saw this probably closer to 92. So I kind of, with my Greenaway, I kind of saw as he went and did things I would say that are almost more narrative, more accessible than sort of his earlier, what I would say with an uneducated guess, art house type stuff. So this stuff, like, I mean, it's the repetition of shapes. I mean, you can see that he's like sketched this in a book. These circular bushes on either side of her, this triangle at the top. And this movie is so full of the contrast of triangles and circles. It's just really like you could just not pay attention to it and just look at that and be entertained. Just the sound, too, of the jump rope hitting the street, the pavement, is like, it's just the ticking of a clock. Like the movie starts off with time and counting already, and then it just like blows it out to the utmost. We see two drunken characters who are next, and they disrobe. This is the husband to the eldest sissy, and another woman. They go to a home. They're getting into a giant bathtub, and then he makes her nude go get one from the orchard and dump out the apples. And it's just every single thing you could just pause it and be like, oh, that's a painting from 1403 or whatever. Like, it's just really lush, and you feel like you could smell the orchard and the apples and the decomposition in that bin that she's about to get into. It's like, oh my gosh. Then we see Joan Cartwright. She's standing lit by a fire with a giant pumpkin behind her, which on the commentary, he says, pay attention to that pumpkin, and I don't think it ever comes back. I don't know what it meant. I have no idea, but his voice saying pay attention to the pumpkin is something I'll always hear. And every October, I'm going to hear Peter Greenaway tell me to pay attention to the pumpkin.
I think the pumpkin does, you see it again.
Is it rotting?
It's
because I looked.
It moves into where he's feasting later
Oh, yeah.
on the table, and then at the end it is rotting. At the very when you're getting into the final scene.
I'll rewatch it again tonight just to pay attention to the pumpkin.
I didn't hear him say pay attention to the pumpkin.
No,
but
that's
I can picture it.
It's in the commentary.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The film's full of tropes, references, lists, games, schemes. The title, of course, is a reference to Painting by Numbers, a children's game. It's all a reference to his childhood, sex, love, and his obsession with death. Smut is it's him as a kid. He just straight up says it in the commentary. He's like, that's me. Everything that's going on with Smut was what was going on with me as a child. And you're like, you're so like, you'll just throw that out there. Like, we're all just wondering, like, what's this name? What's going on? And he's like, that's me, Smut, because I was obsessed with sex and I was obsessed with death and da-da-da-da-da. And that's why it's happening all around Smut. She arrives, drowns her husband. The scene starts, it has 2 number counts in it, and he really starts like nesting these numbers within the scenery. And she dunks him 3 times, a number that comes back constantly in this movie. And I never noticed that until he told me. He's like, she dunks him 3 times. I'm like, everything's intentional. We see a death head moth, which is super cool. Any thoughts on the scene before we move on from the first murder?
Well, I think just how beautifully everything is set up, like it is, a centerpiece or something that would be a focus to be painted or drawn. Like even just the bugs next to the food or that,
yes.
or like dying around, or even just like the backdrop with the pitchfork.
Yeah.
Like it could all be something that would be hanging in some hotel lobby as a portrait, every single one, even just her sitting arranging the flowers behind them while they're still both alive. I think it's a beautiful scene that's tragic.
Mm-hmm.
In his movies there's a lot of adultery happening, and I don't know anything about his childhood and if maybe that was part of his home life, but it's definitely in every movie.
I think it's in all 15 features.
Yes, I think so. And so it is, right away you get what's going on, and that this is a tragedy. This is something that people experience and it haunts them, and I think you get that, and nobody's even really said much yet.
Yeah. It's funny you talk about the bugs on the books, because the first Neubauten record I bought was Tabula Rasa.
For you, I am a chrysanthemum, supernova, urgent star. For you, I'd be a dandelion, 1,000 flowers in the sky, or just a drop in the ocean.
It's exactly that. It's like books with bugs on it, and it's like watching this movie, I was like, I should dig that album back out because it's just the visual coming from paintings. The family comes together to cover it up, and they seek the coroner, Madget, which is a combination of the word maggot and magic, which kind of fills Peter Greenaway's childhood mind of what death is.
How's Hardy?
6.
He's all right.
7.
Hey, what are they doing?
9.
Oh, they're playing Sheep and Tides. Sheep are much maligned, don't you think?
13.
Smut and I are testing their intelligence. It's an Old Testament game.
No, it's not.
Isn't it? Have some heart. How's Jake?
No, thank you. And Jake's all right. Mother, that's not true. What are you doing, Smut?
I'm counting the hairs on the dog.
Whatever for?
To see how many there are.
Madget, I think you ought to come and see Jake.
27. 28.
Smut, go and give Gregory and Tegan some tea.
What about the sheep?
No, they need to be thirsty to be useful. Why do I have to come and see Jake? Is he dead?
Good Lord, how did you know?
The boy Smut, as I said, played by Greenaway. There's constant name word play in the film. The continuous use of animals in landscapes, which sheep in particular, because obviously people count sheep when they're going to sleep, so there's more counting there. This is something that started with the draftsman contract and continued on through his work. One other note, they meant to shoot this in the summer, and they had to shoot it in October, which, if you know England at all, is very cold. It's so windy, but but the wind I think really makes the film look so great because there's so many billowy things and ribbons and stuff that would have just been like laying there. But because it's so windy, it's like, oh, this is really nice. But every time someone goes near water, I'm like, well, that's gonna be so cold. Oh, Smut paints a 32 in the blood of roadkill on the road, and they give us the numbers 29 through 32 in the scene. I was like, I love this. The camera's just sitting on the ground right next to it. It's just such a cool shot. We get the first firework.
Well, and just when I was thinking about the first time I saw this, so it was definitely on a VHS. So I right away knew I wanted to know where all of the numbers were and what all of the games were. Yes. So I had this notebook that Dirk mentioned, which I still have notebooks and carry them around, and I write things in.
Just a couple?
I have so many. I have so many notebooks, and they're all for different things, and I still do it, and I've done it my whole life.
And they're all different sizes.
They're all different sizes. They have different covers, and that sort of lends me to decide what I'm going to write in them. So this specific notebook that I had was
very Greenaway.
4 movies, and it is this painting on the front with some green trees. It's very 90s. Probably got it at like a Barnes and Noble bookstore or something, but it was definitely the more gothy one they had. So I had this notebook, and I would stop the movie, rewind, write each word. I wanted to have the way the games were described recorded exactly so that I would just have them implanted in my memory. So that is how I kept track of all of the games and then all of the numbers in this book. And I didn't ever, I think you might have been the only person I actually showed it to.
Yeah.
Last night I was going to dig it out because I'm sure I still have it.
Oh, it's here.
But I was like, it's like too deep in our stuff, you know, like it's in that closet in there somewhere. I would have to dig through a bunch of boxes. But just the commitment to this movie, I think right away made it impactful to my life, you know. So I've actually watched these scenes over and over, but not just by pushing stop on a remote. Like there was no remote then. I was like sitting in front of the VCR, pushing the button, rewinding it, stopping it, playing it, stopping to write in my notebook, you know. So I'm connected to this movie forever in that way.
I did the same thing. I was like, okay, 32, roadkill. Got it. Like if it's on the back of a beetle, I'm like, it's this beetle. I don't know what type of beetle this is. We don't have the internet yet. So you're like,
such a different time.
Next time I'm near a beetle book, I'll look up beetles. Like it's just like, whatever. I don't know. And then the games, I would try to get it to coincide with numbers and objects and things. And I mean, yeah, I'm right there with you.
It's definitely a movie for curious people.
Yes. Yeah. But not necessary. That's the other thing I would say. Like,
it's not necessary. No, you can just enjoy it at face value.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think sometimes I like stuff that's really sort of obtuse and artsy. And this is very much like, I mean, if you asked a painter, why is that there? And it's like, well, something needed to fill the space here. So that's what I did. And you're like, oh, because I thought it like had symbolism or something. And sometimes he uses symbolism, but it's not in a way that shuts an audience out. I think it's very much inviting you to, if you want to think about it, but it's not necessary. The coroner then rules the husband dead and asks the widow for bodily comfort, which is a term that I think is so funny.
Well, a little bodily comfort would be good for a start.
Imagine, I'm 61.
So?
Aren't I too old?
Were you too old for him?
Bodily comfort. Because we know what he means. You dirty old horn dog. She just drowned her husband. It's an interesting scene, and I love that he plays with it 3 times. That number comes back again and again. The actors, I think, are fantastic in this. It's like they don't have a lot of dialogue, but what they have is delivered in a realistic way, even though it's sort of surreal, some of the situations and things that are going on. It's hard to express, but I appreciate the performances. Next, they play a game of red Skittles with the coffin of the drowned man coming out, and we have this over-the-head shot, this aerial shot, and there's the white sheet that is the wrapping sheet, and if you miss the Skittle, you have to use one hand, and then one eye, and then no hands, which means you're just destined for the wrapping sheet.
If a player in the game of Dead Man's Catch drops a Skittle, he is obliged to suffer a succession of handicaps. First, to catch using one hand, then to catch kneeling on one knee, then on 2 knees, and then with one eye closed. If a player finally drops a catch with both eyes closed, then he is out and must take his place in the winding sheet.
This is so great. I love it. I love how he shoots it. The Skittles, I mean, which are like pegs, giant juggling pegs. I don't know.
Yeah, when we think of Skittles, we think of candy.
We do. We sure do.
We think of a brand name instead of an object.
Yes.
But, yeah. They're like juggling.
Yes, yeah. It's really wonderful. We return to the skipping girl, and Smut's there, and they talk about circumcision.
Are you circumcised? What's that? A piece of your willy is cut off. It's in the Bible. My mother says it's better that way. Oh.
This is Greenaway showing him trying to connect to a girl, and the topic of conversation, he's completely out of his depth. He doesn't understand.
Well, I think that it does show this curiosity about bodies, about sexuality, which is naturally there, and people either talk about it or they do not. And I love that it's part of the story, and to know it's part of his life and his thoughts, because I do think for Smut, he's a very curious teenager, but also willing to like ask questions, which I think is really important. And the people around him are willing to answer them. I do think he is in a very weird situation, exposed to a lot of things he should not be, because I think that changes his path and his viewing of the world, because he is around a lot of adult topics that are overwhelming for him, clearly.
Yeah.
There's a lot of candid conversations in this movie.
Yes.
People speaking very candidly. And then some of the situations are kind of ridiculous, but the conversation does come across really natural and also very direct. So it's kind of an interesting thing that there's like something whimsical about it.
Well, and I do think this is like an example of it really is like a British dark comedy. It is supposed to be a drama comedy, not a tragedy, really.
Yeah.
It is. It's a tragic tale, but I think the way that we are supposed to see it and enjoy it as viewers, I think this way in a lot of his movies, you see the flaws of humans, but it's also supposed to entertain us. So in a way, we wouldn't think of it as like an American comedy, but I think it would be considered a British comedy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. In the next scene, we get a mixture of those things because we have a number on a swimsuit as she gets out of the river. And this is one of those scenes that's shot like a painting. I mean, the mist in the background, the river, where they're at in the corner of the screen. It's really great. And she jokes that she's pregnant, but she's not. And he says in the commentary, it's an homage to a French landscape painter, somebody who I don't even know the name of what he was saying. It wasn't even one of the big ones. It's like some obscure person that he's a fan of. It's really... I mean, like I said, you could just pause any part of this and just be like, look at this thing.
Yeah.
And it's all there. Like even later on, he fills the sky with fireworks. They're all really shooting fireworks while they're, filming this boat. And nowadays that would all be fake. I don't feel a connection to it. Instead, you can marvel and be like, wow.
I also have to say that watching it now on this different platform, and with the
Blu-ray,
with watching it on Blu-ray and
55-inch television.
Yeah, I had probably the worst TV that I found on the street when I watched it. So this was definitely different, and I remember there being fireworks and bugs and things like that, but I definitely did not see them in this way. I didn't see the beauty in it because my TV didn't show me that. It was really nice to watch it.
I love that. Revisiting things now in HD.
Yeah.
Yes. It's so beautiful. Like those fireworks, I was like, this is like really watching fireworks.
This is very cool.
Where before I don't even think I could see that there was anything happening. I could just hear them.
Yeah. Speaking of fireworks, Smut finds more dead, fires more fireworks, and then we get a scene where the women are bonding sort of in a car over this murder that has happened. It's one of many car scenes. I love how he lights these night shots. And I also love what I meant to mention at the river scene is we really get, like you were talking about Carmelita, he's excessively lighting day shots, which you don't see a lot. They're intentional yellows or highlights that are added to these scenes where you're like, if you're gonna think about it, you're like, where's that light reflecting from? Because it's just coming from a very like odd angle, but it's very interesting how he plays with these lights. But at night of them in the car, I love the camaraderie of this family of women and where this is going to take us. Smut and his father, of course, are collecting insects at night, and the number count continues. Smut goes to next see the coroner, his dad, which we talked about last night. That's his dad. Correct?
It's his dad.
Okay, great. And he can't sleep, and we see a giant painting in the background of the coroner's office. That is Children Games. It's an oil-on-panel painting by the Flemish Renaissance artist Pieter Bruegel the Elder, painted in 1560. Obviously, intentionally put in the movie. I love it so much. They discuss circumcision and Samson. This is a reoccurring thing about the cutting of hair, the cutting of the foreskin. I didn't get it then. Now I think I get it. But again, not necessary. Next outside, we see the gravedigger. This is a character that exists in the film just to bury the dead that Smut finds. Awesome. I love Sid with his giant shiny shovel. Even though he's constantly digging in the dirt, this thing is immaculate. Smut tells him where to find another dead body, and off he goes into the night. It's so good.
Just shuffling off.
Yeah.
Yep. Take care of it.
It's fantastic. Next, we get to one of the most enjoyable things, I think, in Peter Greenaway movies, and that is his fascination with European table paintings. His films are littered with meal table scenes. He loves to seat someone at a table and cover it in stuff. All 15 of his movies feature these scenes. He himself speaks at length about how he cannot escape this idea, and if he doesn't know where to put someone in a scene, they're at a table, and he's going to cover it in stuff. And it's just like, I love it. I love every single tablescape. It's the camera pans across these things like it's a landscape, and your eye is just drawn in at like all the minutia sitting there. There's always apples and oranges and grapes and bugs and books and metronomes and like, it's...
If you want a fun activity, for those of you that like to do things like this, so if you look at scenes with Smut's room or then Madget's room, there are 100 items in Madget's room that start with the letter M.
Yes.
And then 100 items in Smut's room that start with the letter S. And so that was on purpose.
Yeah, he chose all 100 items in each room.
Yeah, each thing is chosen. And I do think that is something that's like setting these grand scenes and these grand centerpiece tables. It's just part of it. It's part of like creating and building a scene. And it's why I think this movie is so wonderful. Like there's never anything that doesn't give you something to enjoy, either just to see it and be like, whoa, that's a lot of stuff in that room. Yeah. Or to be like, okay, what would that be? And can I find all 100 things, you know, throughout the time that we spend in those environments?
Yeah. It's fascinating because it's a film about a family and murders. Very simple story. It's not convoluted in any way. But the more that if you want to dig into it, you can find so many comforting corners of this that are just full of things. And I love that for movies. I especially stuff like this where it's so visual, such a visual feast that you can, and I'll say it for a third time, pause it and just take it all in. And if you want to play a game, he's set up games in the movie for you to play just like a child. That's so fun.
It is fun. And I love how at the very beginning, the little girl skipping rope says that she only counts to 100 because then everything is the same. It starts over.
Yes.
So he's letting you know from the beginning, everything's going to be in hundreds.
Yep.
That's not a mystery. And you can have a lot of fun with all those little details and finding the things. But he's letting you know up front. And also I noticed like foreshadowing of things and it's done visually.
Yes.
Like when the middle sissy, I've been calling her Sissy the Younger.
That works perfect.
When they find some roadkill and she puts her hand in the red paint and she hasn't drowned her husband yet.
Yep.
But it's like she's got red hands, bloody hands.
Yeah.
It's all those little visual details.
Yeah. He loves
They're letting you know
that.
where the story's going.
Yes, he's like a huge fan of that, and I appreciate that so much, especially when you rewatch something, because sometimes you might not get it the first time. I sometimes am looking in the wrong spot on the screen or something, but then on a rewatch, you're like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing. He absolutely loves it. The pool scene, we get more numbers, the highest being 44, meaning we're 6 moments from the middle of the film. Smut holds up 2 bees that have 45 and 46 painted on the back, which is an image that will never leave you. At the funeral, the women count by 3s.
Here comes a bit I've never liked.
Bite your lip and start counting in 3s.
3,
6,
9, 12,
15, 18,
21,
24, 27,
30,
33, 36,
39,
42, 45,
48.
51.
What are they doing?
Counting. They often do it.
Are you the local coroner?
I am.
How come a 6-foot man drowns in a 4-foot bath?
I was just like, I love all of this. Like, I mean, knowing I love the reflecting skin where someone carries a bird and the 2 people make dove sounds cooing for, we don't know why. I mean, all this stuff is like, it's in me. I love it so much. Before I rush on, anything from the pool scene or the funeral?
I was just going to say that also when I watched this movie, IMDb, of course, didn't exist.
Yes.
So I was looking up because I wanted to know one of the person's names while we were watching it. And I realized the entire time and the many times I've seen this movie, I thought that the sissies were all like a family. Like there's sissy 1 was mom and the other 2 were daughters. And that is not true.
What?
According to IMDb.
This confused me too.
So there is the sissy 1, the first drowning is 1, and that's the mom. And then the next one is sissy 2 is her daughter. And then the third one, the youngest one, is actually their cousin.
Oh, wait. Yeah, I think that's what I said. It's a grandmother, her daughter, and their niece. Is that right?
Well, I just didn't know that. I always thought they were a mom and 2 daughters.
That's what I
the
thought
entire
the first time too.
I then once I saw that, I tried to notice if they give you any clue to that. And the only way that I know this is just from the way that it's written in the casting.
Yeah. I should also mention in that pool scene, we're introduced to the 2 brothers of the husband that's been murdered.
I think they're
cousins, and they both have names.
Jonah and Moses, which are 2 biblical names associated with water. Their heads emerge from water in the scene. Come on, Peter Greenaway. Amazing. And I think they're really supposed to bring some fun.
They're goofs.
Of we're the goofy detectives trying to solve the crime, you know?
That and the European men's swim shorts are supposed to bring the fun in the movie with not covering butt cracks at all. We then see the dead man's family conspiring at night. And then I rush right into my favorite shot. I love this shot so much. It's what you'll see in the trailer for the film. It's the crane shot outside the house that lowers and goes through the tent to the giant number 50. I could watch that on loop forever. It's so satisfying for me. You know, that house wasn't a real house. They built it there. All of the triangles and everything, he had all planned every aspect of it. And the way that you swoop down into this scene that's going to be bookended with another crane shot is like, oh, just give me that. I love it so much. They party, they play sports. There's cricket, which he thinks is asinine, which is why he's making so much fun of cricket. There's masks, there's games. This is like the most European art house section of the film, I think, 'cause you just feel all the tassels and ribbons and unnecessary, like, just minutia going on. Then there's the foreshadowing as the next person almost drowns, or I guess he turns out to be the second person, and then asks for a haircut for comfort, so the Samson thing kind of comes back. And my second favorite shot, as I said, is that crane shot of kids playing at night, which when you see that, hopefully you remember being a kid playing at night and what that is like, that feeling of the cold night air, the idea that, like, I'm not in bed, this is amazing, I'm free. And he completely intends that. He lingers on this shot because it was so impactful on his childhood that you're running around in the countryside in a field with other kids and you're all just like wild and there's no rules. And it's like, God, I remember that is such a beautiful childhood thing to put into a movie about murder.
Well, and during that scene, too, Smut's kind of describing this game where he's describing the characters as they are. So he's saying, when the maiden in the corner and the hanged man. So he's kind of describing to us this game, what's in the past of the movie and what's in the future of the movie. And so it is like the perfect middle point. Mm-hmm. He's telling us what's going to happen. He's telling us what has happened and what to expect. And just in Smut describing the game.
You sound like someone that had a notebook filled with this game. No, it's so perfect. I love it. Carmelita, did you have any childhood memories of feral nighttime kid stuff? Pre-goth cemeteries.
I do. The street that I grew up on for most of my childhood, there were a ton of kids that lived, with like in a 2-block radius. But even down our street, like every other house had, 1, 2, 3. One house, they had 4 siblings in the house. And so, in the summertime, it's like all the kids would be out front and it got dark later. And so, everyone would be throwing water balloons or riding their bikes or, whatever.
Yeah.
It was nice.
That's awesome. RoboCop. Did I catch you in time? Are you still there? Remember when Paul McCrane gets all melty from toxic waste and then splats on a car? Imagine that movie without that scene. Would it still be good? Okay, bad example, RoboCop rules, but his death adds flavor. And you know what else adds flavor? Marshall's hot sauce. You can wake up any boring meal with habanero carrot curry or serrano ginger lemongrass, just to name a few. These delicious and flavorful sauces will have you grinning bigger than Tarman in Return of the Living Dead. Marshall's hot sauce even has a new line of seasonings, including an incredible barbecue rub, where they soak dates in whiskey and then freeze-dry them and powder them to add a little sweetness with no added sugar. There's also chicken marinade and even a volcano sparkle that'll make your body melt, just like in the movie Body Melt. The best part is you can enter VHUS Podcast at checkout for 20% off. So liven up those meals and your taste buds at marshallshotsauce.com and enter VHS Podcast for 20% off. And now, back to the show. We next return to the girl jumping rope, and we get more stories of death.
Then Delilah cut off Samson's hair, I think. At a large party, he summoned up the last of his strength, held onto two pillars, and pulled the house down. His last words were, "And take good care of Nellie." Who's Nellie? This is Nellie, although she sometimes insists on being called Nancy.
It was Charles II.
What was?
His last words were, "And take good care of Nellie."
Who told you that?
My mother. She said she'd wish she'd been Nell Gwyn, because she'd like to have serviced Charles II.
And this is where he really starts throwing in a bunch of stuff I didn't know, but he's using famous last words of people that died, like army people and all this kind of stuff. There's a scene later on where a line is typed into the typewriter, and that's the famous last words of a general, I guess, who asked his last thing he said was to his next down commanding officer, and he says, like, "Kiss me, Holden," or something like that, because that was the person's name.
It's Kiss Me Hard, I think.
Kiss Me.
Yeah.
I think Harder was the guy's last name or something. It's something that lives in European culture as a joke line or something, but we don't know it in the States. And even me trying to write down all of these things, I was like, we don't have 8 hours to talk about everything that's in this film, but we could.
One thing that came up in that beach scene is that they're telling the story of Adeline. And you and I both looked at each other, and I was like, did we name our daughter after this movie, like unintentionally? And I don't know, maybe we did.
I mean, we both watched parts of this so many times, it's quite possible that our daughter is named after a moment.
We both just looked at each other in a moment of shock.
Yeah.
Because, like, we didn't really ever decide where we got that name from. It was just something we wrote down, and then we were like, when we see her, we'll know what her name is.
Has she ever asked you where her name come from?
No, we just told her we had written a bunch of things down that we thought were fun and cool, and and that we would know when we saw her. And as soon as we saw her, we were like, "Yep, Adeline."
Yeah, Adeline Pillowbook Marshall. That's what we don't know where the middle came from, but oh, geez. Smut's obsessed with cricket, so his father is taping on his body all the places that cricket people were struck and died. And it's all with different colored tape. I mean...
Which is such a parent thing to do who deals with death. Like
yes.
My mom, because she worked a time when I was young, she worked at a bunch of different jobs as a nurse, but she worked in an emergency room one time. So then, like, anytime I would do anything, she would be like, "Oh, you're going to go out on a boat? Let's talk about all the tragedies that I've seen coming through the ER of people on boats." Whatever it was. You can't go ride around with kids in a car because we had somebody that flew out the window. You know, it's just like that's what parents do to try to like protect their children when they've seen tragedies. But really, it doesn't. No. It doesn't help. It makes you want to do the things still the same. You just know more about all these people who have died. That's it.
Yeah.
Your brain is just filled with horror. Thanks, Mom.
So true. Next, we get the daughter is trying to entice her husband, and she's eating an ice lolly, and it's just one long shot. And like once I started paying attention to how often he does this and just lingers on images, it's so interesting because she comes out of one room, goes down the outside of the building into his room, lounges naked, trying to entice him while he sits at a typewriter, and the camera, there's no edit. It's so fascinating to see. And I didn't pay attention to it. And there's no attention really drawn to it. But once you start looking at that stuff, it's really weird. And then, of course, he just goes off to the sea. And he says the dying last words of some men on his way out there, which is more Greenaway being Greenaway. And then the runners approach, and two of them are wearing the numbers 70 and 71. And I love that. And there's a whole reason behind that as well. But I didn't write everything down. As I said, we don't have 8 hours for this. But we then see the dead man surrounded by everyone in a tent and a giant dolphin sculpture that was part outside. He's now moved inside to the corner of the room. Why? Because he's Peter Greenaway. And that's what we love. We want that big dolphin staring at us while they're staring at a dead person. It's so good. And I also love in the next scene that we are at the funeral and the two runners, 70 and 71, are there, but they're in jackets, but still wearing their running numbers. It's
Yeah, in every scene they have.
It's so good.
They have their.
So you're never like, who are they? Oh, those are the runners. Like,
it's those guys. It's the runners.
oh my gosh, it's so good. We see the dead cows and the number 79. So were these cows struck by their bicycle or okay?
They were just dead in the road because Smut had already been there and painted them.
Okay.
They did not kill them with their bike.
Okay. I was like, wait a second. The coroner next hits on the newest widow, and they talk of the possibility of necrophilia, which is an interesting conversation, as he is a coroner, and he says he won't divulge if he's ever had relations with a corpse.
I think that's the thing with Magic. Like in the beginning, you kind of feel like sorry for him, and you see that you think he's being like kind of charmed by the three sissies. But I think throughout the movie, as you learn more and more about him, you're kind of like, ugh. It starts out that you sort of feel bad for him, but then as he's really like telling us who he is, he's not that great of a guy.
None of them are.
There's a lot of morally gray characters in this.
Yeah, yes.
Offbeat, quirky, really interesting. It's fun to spend time with them, but they're also doing a lot of questionable things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, he's not being professional. He's been helping them cover up these murders. That's morally gray. They were drowning people rather than seeking a divorce. That's morally, you know, so it is kind of cool. But you make a great point, Sarah. It's like every time he makes a pass at a sissy, he kind of ups the ante.
Yeah.
Gets a little more aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
And we learn a little more about his history.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting.
Yeah. And on this walk, they also notice that Smut is not collecting bugs in his normal bug spot. So they head back home, and Smut has circumcised himself.
Oh, Smut.
Oh, geez. Peter Greenaway, what are you doing? It's that idea of Samson, cutting hair, circumcision, all intertwined. Still not sure I get it, but maybe I do.
When Smut is telling them, he's like, don't worry, I sanitized the scissors. He's like, I'm okay, you guys. And I'm like, no, dude, you're not okay.
Yeah.
This isn't how you do this. But nobody ever told him that somebody else does it.
Right.
They told him what it was.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't say you go to a doctor or someone professional to do it.
Yeah.
Bless his little heart. Well, and that's one of the cool things about this story. And this like reoccurring theme of like sexual desire and dissatisfaction and people wanting to be desired or having a fixation on someone and wanting to impress them, or, you know, we just kind of see that over and over again. And so like the Samson hair thing, it's like Delilah cuts Samson's lock of hair. That's where his power is in the hair. So this woman who he's in love with emasculates him basically. And then you've got circumcision in the Bible, and that's like literally snipping the manhood.
Right.
And Smut's doing it because he is hoping to court the affections of the little jump roping girl.
Right. Yeah. It's
very cool.
It's fairly cool.
And before the second sissy drowns her husband in the sea, he's telling her that he has an affair with his assistant.
Yes, yeah.
Like he's saying, you know, when she's talking about, she's trying to get him to just sleep with her. And he's like, nah, I do that. I dial 9 on the phone because that's how he gets to his assistant. So he's admitting to her that he's having this affair, which is what kind of evokes the next scene. But I don't think I really understood that until this time that we watched it.
I just thought he was gross. I was just, you're gross.
Yeah. I was like, you're just
so gross.
When, why do you keep swimming? Like, clearly
you suck at it.
You suck at it. So, I don't know. Are you having a heart attack? He always says his legs stop working when he goes in the sea.
He gets a cramp.
Second time it's happened.
Yeah.
So it's like, I mean, she could have just not gone in there and maybe he would have just died. She didn't have to go into the sea, but she felt like she did because I think she was like, you just told me you're sleeping with your assistant.
Yeah.
Like, bye, dude.
Yeah. I'm going to put on my murder beret and come out there and kill you.
Yes. I've never put on a beret to go into the ocean before, but maybe I will from now on.
Yeah. You want to blend in.
She looked cute.
Yeah. The next man drowns. I love this pool sequence. I mean, they even put it on the cover of the Blu-ray. It's the bottom half of it. It's the camera being halfway underwater. It's just, he's got this flotation belt around his chest because he can't swim. And it is so great. The underwater stuff looks wonderful. The light of everything.
It's so great, but it's also something I didn't see until we just watched
Sure.
it. Like, I mean, I could see all of it, but not as beautifully could you see, like, their bodies underneath with their heads. You just could see a shadow of a body, really. But this is so beautiful.
It's gorgeous. And the moment after he's dead and she's sitting on the side of the pool and the camera just lingers on her face while she emotionally goes through the loss and the realization that he's gone. And it's like this emotional roller coaster that plays through the grief on her face. It's so cool in a movie that, like, for the rest of it, I wouldn't say you're really emotionally attached to all of it. You know, you're kind of an outsider watching everything, maybe, is how I felt about a lot of it. But in this moment, you're just like, oh, there is a weight to this. There is a weight to the death, you know, that he's like showing us. He's not cutting right away to another counting sequence or a dining room chair with a teacup on it in water for some reason.
It might be one of the longest scenes.
It might be.
Of her just tragically sitting, crying.
Lit by the pool.
Yeah, next to him.
It's fantastic. A thing I've said more than 3 times on this podcast.
Fantastic.
You got to call them like you see them.
Right. So if you're following along and counting by 3, we have 3 dead men and a detective shows up. I love the detective showing up because it's, like you said, Carmelita, these scenes play out sort of like plays, and there's action in the foreground, but there's someone doing something almost always in the background. And here, Smut's screwing in light bulbs that are tapping against the window. In previous scenes, like Smut and the other 2 ladies were outside while the coroner first talks to the first sissy. It's like he loves to stack the screen with things that aren't necessarily connected, but happening and coinciding at the same time. I just love this. And the floor, littered with stuff. Just things piled all over the place. You could just, again, pause it and look at all. It's fascinating. We get a great shot of sheep circling around in this giant tree. That's the other thing he loves to do, is he loves to put things like something in the center and then like move things around the centerpiece, you know, whether it's like a lighthouse or a church tower. Here it's a giant tree. And then we see the 3 women walk along the sea that's littered with dead herrings. I love this scene. It's amazing.
Together here. No need for secrecy.
What on earth made you choose this place?
I thought the water tower would mean we could keep them under surveillance.
Who officially invited them?
They invited themselves.
Are you sure Madgett didn't say something?
And there's the pyrotechnical expert.
It just won't light. Too damp. It's not surprising. Bellamy was pretty wet out of the water.
What's that smell?
That man has a nose for a call.
His son is quicker.
What are they?
You know you've got yours coming to you, don't you?
What? Invitation to that field near Brough.
Which is surrounded by that thick hedge.
Where Smut is sent to catch moths and never returns with any.
Madgett's harmless. He's really only interested in games and chocolate pudding.
I wouldn't mind.
What wouldn't you mind?
It'd be like sleeping with your uncle.
Be like bribing the referee.
What would?
More than a referee. Poor Madgett. It's like the story of Billy Goat Gruff.
What is?
With Madgett as the goblin under the bridge.
Do you think the grass is really greener across the stream?
Without a doubt. Hey, these are herring. Do you think they're edible?
Well, now, Sissy, it's your turn.
I like his hands.
I might let him touch me and then I'd tell you all about it.
Well, you are the last in the line.
What if he were to be disappointed?
That might spoil it. You better not go too far, then.
If one of us were to make it with him, surely it would exclude the other two.
Any thoughts on the dead herring scene?
It's a beautiful landscape. We get this really fun conversation between the three sissies. And you can't help but kind of chuckle that they're having this beautiful moment, these three women, their camaraderie, and joking about magic. And they're just walking along with all these dead herrings at their feet.
Yeah, there's so many.
Yeah.
And
A lot.
Those
It's a
are
lot.
real dead fish. I don't know how they did it. And then far behind is Magic, while the three of them. And then they're like, we're talking about you. And he's just like, at this point, they're just stringing him along to the final scene, I feel like. We get the numbers 92, 93, 94. We're 6 away from the final scene. Next, Magic hits on the newest widow, just so we really know what a dirtbag he is. It's uncomfortable. She fights him off, luckily, and I had forgotten it goes that far, the movie. So I was a little uncomfortable, but Greenaway's keeping things moving at a brisk pace. The jump rope girl's hit by a car, which is Smut learning about death and the end of love. The final game is a tug of war, which is interesting. And then Smut hangs himself with the jump rope from his adolescent crush. I mean, if I couldn't have a more goth moment in a movie in the 90s, I mean, it's just so...
Bless his little heart.
so sad and cute at the same time. I don't know. We get the final fireworks finale, the boat scene where they toss out their in-loving memory items, which I was just... And then you get 100 on the boat. Boom. That's Peter Greenaway. He's done. He drops the mic. He's out. Final thoughts on Drowning by Numbers.
I love this.
Yes.
I really do. I love a fairy tale. I love folk tales. This has a lot of those aspects. I, too, am obsessed with death. And so, all of the reoccurring talk about death and all those little details about last word, all of that stuff I love. I love fine art paintings, especially like those table settings, vanitas, still life, like all those Dutch painters that do like, here's a bucket full of dead fish. And that's the painting. Like, I love that stuff.
Same.
So this movie, the aesthetic of it, the style, I love the wordplay. I'm a big fan of wordplay. I like theater.
Same.
So this one spoke to me on all those levels.
Yes.
Really enjoyed it.
Sarah, you hate this movie?
Oh, yeah. I'm never watching it again. You know, I never know sometimes going back to something, like, I'm like, am I still going to like it? I haven't seen it in such a long time. And really, I hadn't seen it in such a long time because of access. We have it on VHS, but, you know, for a while we didn't have a VHS player. Like, you know, whatever. I'm so glad I found it again.
Yeah.
I still enjoy the games so much. I think they all just mirror life and the tragedies of it and just trying to win at living, which is impossible to do. And I think that one of the last scene is really one of my... I love the opening scene and I love the ending scene because I think the opening scene sort of sets us up for the tragedies we're going to see and the experiences we're going to have, and that they're going to be haunting and they're going to be with us. And then I think the final scene is so haunting and tragic. I mean, I think anytime you have someone take their life, it's a tragic scene, but it's a beautiful scene. And he, you know, the final game, he says, this is the best game of all because the winner is also the loser and the judge's decision is also final. And I think that sums up life, you know, and it sums up taking your life. And he was in this position where he thought that because his first love died, that was it, that nothing in life would ever exist. And I think that in that one sentence of describing the game, while his feet are dangling from the tree and the jump rope is around his neck and Sid is digging his grave, how can you do anything any better?
Yeah.
It's a scene that evokes so much feeling and emotion and connection to life. So I still dig it all these years later. I think that I would really recommend anybody watches it because I think you can either really get into it or you can just view it, and just viewing it is enough. You don't have to keep track of everything. You just enjoy the beauty.
Yeah, I agree. It's something that, like, I never really thought about I mean, this is probably my favorite Greenaway movie. And I would say, gee, Dirk, I don't get why, but I have a giant poster of The Reflecting Skin on my wall, which is about a boy who's obsessed with death, learning what love and death and all these things are. One of my favorite Derek Jarman movies is Wittgenstein, which is about a child philosopher who's talking about death. I mean, clearly...
There's a pattern here.
There's a pattern here, and I love these things. They make me get emotional. They make me cry. They make me also happy that they exist, and that, like you were saying, Sarah, people, expressing this in this scene with everything happening at once. Or you could just be like, "Damn, this looks really cool." Like, you don't have to get into all of that. I should say also at the end of this movie that the women swim away and Paget sinks with the ship. Like, that's the situation. Which I also love that these three women win. They get rid of these shitty men. Like, that's, and Greenaway making that tale be what it is.
That's his story.
That's his story. And
that's his tale he wants to tell, and I'm here for it.
Same. Yeah, I absolutely love it. I hope if you're listening to this and you haven't watched any Peter Greenaway and this doesn't sound boring to you, which I not everything's for everybody. But hopefully we've enticed you to check out this film and other Greenaway movies. There's 15 features that you can check out. Brian Dennehy's great in Belly of an Architect, but you can't really go wrong with any of them. Draftsman Contract, if you like art in movies, that one is like paintings galore. It's absolute. I might watch it tonight after I rewatch this to see what happens to that pumpkin, because I'm going to pay attention to it, Peter Greenaway. I will. Carmelita, thanks so much for coming back to continue our winning streak of awesome movies.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me back. Thank you for giving me the little nudge I needed.
To go Greenaway?
To dig into Peter Greenaway's work beyond
of course.
The Pillow Book.
Yes. Which we all...
I would have got around to some of these other films and Drowning by Numbers eventually.
Sure.
But I'm so happy that I got to it now and that we could talk about it.
That's kind of the fun thing, is when a friend can just give you that little, like, hey, you really might, maybe check this out. And you're like, well, okay, I will now. And sometimes that can come from just listening to a podcast. People I don't even know will be like, hey, I'm really into this new Lycia EP. And I'm like, I haven't thought about them since the 90s when I got into Black Tape for a Blue Girl and Project Records.
Oh, I love Black Tape for a Blue Girl.
Oh, man. So it was like, I was super 90s yesterday. I was like deep into... I mean, I almost put on a fishnet shirt and dyed my hair pink.
Do it.
Yeah. So, I mean, Carmelita, where can people find you? Anything people can look forward to seeing from you? I know you've been on a number of podcasts.
I have. I've had a couple of appearances recently. I did an episode of Film Feast talking about Pulp Fiction.
I just listened to that. Yes, lovely.
Yeah, that just came out at the time of this recording, and an episode of Master Carpenter on the Cobwebs podcast.
Oh, yes.
Talking about Christine and Rebel Without a Cause. So
great.
Those are just came out at the time of our recording now. And I've got some other things coming soon.
Brewing.
So
okay.
The easiest way to keep up with that stuff, if you want to, is to find me on Twitter, kind of on Blue Sky, also on Letterboxd.
Okay.
Same handle for everything, at Carmelita Says.
That's right. Carmelita with a C.
That's right.
Excellent. Sarah, what's going on with you? What can people look forward to that you can speak to? What do you got?
I mean, you can always just find what I'm up to on Instagram.
That's right.
Which is Spicy Marshall. You post about what I'm doing on Marshall's Hot Sauce on Instagram as well.
That's true.
So
all the
that's
creeps
usually
think it's you, but it's me.
Yeah, that's usually my sauce life. And then mine is what I'm cooking, where I'm going, what I'm eating. We're making a family effort right now to really support our local businesses, especially downtown. We had a really rough winter and a storm, and so we're trying to make sure that we're giving lots of love to all of our business friends. So if you can check out our Instagram if you're in Portland and then go visit those places, I'm sure they would all really appreciate it. I'm taking our daughter around to do some fun stuff around town, and we're going around and eating really fun places. So anywhere you are, of course, always do that, but you can check out what we're doing on our Instagram.
That's right. So Spicy Marshall and Marshall's Hot Sauce.
That's it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both for doing this. I was really looking forward to it. As
Me
always,
too.
I am Dirk Marshall, and this has been VH Us.
What do you really want?